Zack Snyder is the gift that keeps on giving. Not content with making our eyes, ears, and brains bleed from sheer unadulterated boredom, confusion, and a general disregard for how to tell a story not once, not twice, but he has returned for a third outing to give us 2 director's cuts, adding a total of 1 hour and 58 minutes to the runtime. How many of these 118 minutes are dedicated singularly to slow-motion grain harvesting, we will have to wait and see. This video is going to require something of a baseline knowledge of Rebel Moon, which I know is a rather sadistic thing for me to expect of you, but I have previously made videos covering both A Child of Fire and The Scargiver, and so if you have not already, you can experience the glorious slurry of ineptitude that is Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, without having to actually watch Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Very briefly, however, I am going to provide a basic plot overview of the original cuts, which won't take long because the plot of Rebel Moon is obscenely simple. Going chronologically, Kora was a wee lass who lived on planet Ringpeace until the most evilest of evilmen, Balisarius Call of the Adeptus Mechanicus, turned up and murder-fucked the populace. He spared Kora, kidnapped her, and trained her to be an elite soldier of the Imperium. The Imperium has been pillaging the universe for thousands of years, but are inexplicably ruled by a king who seems to be a pretty alright chap. Balisarius, however, is not a pretty alright chap, and so he conspires to assassinate the royal family. Kora, having now been stationed as the personal bodyguard to Princess Space Jesus, is also involved in the assassination. Namely, she blows a hole through a child's torso. Balisarius then pins the whole thing on Kora, making her the most wanted fugitive in the known universe. Kora escapes, lands on the remote moon of Velt, and lives there for 2 moon seasons as a farmer. Atticus Noble, an admiral of the Imperium, then arrives on Velt to acquire their grain. He murders the village leader and intends to return in 10 weeks to collect the harvest. After much prompting, Kora decides to assemble a ragtag team of interchangeable edgy sock puppets to defend the village from Noble when he returns. After about 2 hours of bullshittery, the Imperium returns, the villagers and the sock puppets successfully kill the soldiers and blow up the ship, and also murder an imprisoned interdimensional god being, and Kora is informed that Princess Space Jesus somehow survived her attempted assassination. But anyway, we are not here today to talk about A Child of Fire or The Scargiver. No, we are here to talk about 2 totally different movies, entitled Chalice of Blood and The Curse of Forgiveness, because Zack decided to rename the films for the director's cuts. To avoid confusion jumping back and forth between these 4 interchangeable movie titles that no one can remember, I will instead refer to them as either the original cuts or the director's cuts. As this video is going to focus on the new material, I'm not going to repeat any points of criticism from the original films, unless these points of criticism are altered by the existence of this new material. With that out of the way, let us regrettably dive back into the blurry, oversaturated nightmare world of Rebel Moon, but this time it will be better due to the abundance of tits and blood spatters, or so I have been told, for there has never been a director's cut quite like this. The director's cut removes the opening narration from Anthony Botkins, and instead gives us a cold open with Admiral Noble landing on an unknown planet after the Imperium has invaded. We see the Imperium stripping some women and branding their titties.
You belong to the mother world now, pagan witch.
Because the Imperium are now religious fundamentalists who are monotheistic and who consider worshippers of any other religion to be heathens. Also, why pagans? I don't think these priestesses are actually meant to be pagans, as in they are not followers of a pre-Christian religion that emerged in Europe. Given the context, the Imperium priest is presumably using the word pagan as an insult, as pagan is a blanket term used by Christians to refer to any and all religions that do not worship the Christian God. The point of this phrase is to say, you guys are worshipping the wrong god, which in a nutshell is what is happening in this scene. Why Zack decided to directly reference present-day religions, and specifically chose to use the word pagan in a sci-fi epic set in an unknown part of the universe during an unknown period of time, in which neither Earth nor Christianity ever appears, I have absolutely no idea. The easy fix for this would have been to simply call them witches instead of pagan witches, but then Zack wouldn't have been able to have his symbolism. The priest continues that the king's eye sees you for all time, before branding some more heretic jubblies, which strongly suggests that the Imperium worships the slain king as a literal god. This is all very Warhammer-y, although I expect nothing less from Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, trademark, copyright, patent pending, etc., etc. The Emperor of Man in the setting of Warhammer 40,000 is kept alive in stasis, and he is worshipped as a god by the citizens of the Imperium. Why this happened is too complex for me to get into here, but in the case of Rebel Moon, the suggestion is that these red-robed guys who did pretty much nothing in the original cuts are in fact priests dedicated to the slain king. As the king was only slain somewhat recently, it must therefore be that this kind of tyrannical pseudo-religious oppression and enslavement only started very recently. And this makes me wonder why Balisarius would at the very least permit, and at the most encourage, this kind of deification and worship of the king, the man Balisarius personally murdered in order to usurp him. We see at the end of part 2 that Balisarius is very much enjoying being the emperor of mankind.
Sire, we've discovered...
Shh, one moment. I do love this part.
And so one might expect that Balisarius would maybe replace all past iconography with images of his own face so as to usher in a new age of evil. But apparently, that is not what he did. Apparently, he instead either created or allowed a cult-like state religion that is solely dedicated to the worship of the man he murdered in cold blood. Yes, in the original cuts we do have mention of the slain king.
I'm Admiral Atticus Noble, loyal representative of the slain king.
But this is never more than a formality, and we can chalk this specificity of language down to the fact that the king of the Imperium is dead, and although Balisarius has now taken over, Balisarius is not actually the king in a technical sense. In the director's cut, however, it is used as a salute and or battle cry, and it is very obviously a fully established cult dedicated entirely to the veneration of Balisarius's enemy. This does not make any fucking sense whatsoever. We see that there is a small family consisting of 2 parents, 2 young kids, and 1 older teen fighting off the soldiers. Aw, this little guy looks cool. I hope nothing bad happens to him. They have evidently managed to survive the entire battle, and they appear to be the last men standing. How did they survive the entire battle? Well, because the Imperium soldiers are utterly useless, as seen here, where one guy just runs in on his own and tries to take a hostage instead of just shooting them, as well as here, where not 1 but 2 soldiers have the element of surprise and yet they walk up to the family so that they can get shanked. This may be due to the fact that the father is the administrator of the planet, and so maybe the soldiers were ordered not to kill them. Maybe this is the case, but they spend most of their time in this scene trying to kill them, and just because you may have been ordered to capture someone alive, this usually does not mean that your brain stops working. Okay, soldiers, we need you to capture the family of the administrator, alive and unspoiled. But sir, killing is all we know how to do. As in, we can't do anything else. If you tell us not to kill, we're little more than lemmings wearing ineffective armor and carrying weapons that can't shoot through a fucking table despite being able to vaporize a human body. Oh, don't worry, I'll get to that later. Anyway, the family decides to fall back, making me wonder why they hadn't already fallen back. In particular, because they were just defending themselves behind a broken statue, when evidently being inside a somewhat structurally intact building had been an option this entire time. This means that at some point during the Imperium's takeover of the planet, this family were like, oh cool, a statue, let's fight there. And then they remembered that there is a building directly behind them. The way one might fix this, if one was so inclined, might be to show that this family is trying to get somewhere. Maybe they already came from this building and got pinned down behind the statue whilst on their way to the last dropship or whatever. That isn't what happens though, and so the setup of this firefight makes very little sense. The family flees to the throne room whilst the father tries to buy them time, and oh no, they dropped their little Pokemon, and I'm sorry Zack, but what the fuck is this? There are at least 20 to 30 soldiers closing in on this guy, and they all just forget that they have projectile weapons at the same time, because the Imperium definitely appears to be sending the Idiot Brigade into this guy so that he can kill them all one by one. The more competent soldiers wait for him to murder the willing participants of Operation Human Shield, before halting at the bottom of the steps, and they allow the man to run back inside the building and grab his Pokemon. The man explains to his Pokemon that the soldiers want to hurt her. He gives the Pokemon a little hug, reassures him that he is the very best, like no one ever was, and the Pokemon then runs towards the soldiers. This I found perplexing, because I figured, well, okay, he's explaining to the Pokemon that he's going to sacrifice himself and the Pokemon needs to go and protect the family or some shit. But what happens next is that the Pokemon runs towards the soldiers who are like, oh, look at this little guy. And yeah, I guess the Pokemon is going to maybe attack the soldiers to give the dad time to escape, maybe? Is he going to grow some claws and jump on their faces? Is he going to evolve into a Blastoise? There's no easy way to say this. He extends his arms, squeezes really hard, and then...
Oh my god!
Less than 8 minutes into the film, and I could not stop laughing. Thank you, Zack. Thank you. So to reiterate what just happened, this dude waited until he was nearly killed, as was his family, and then he was like, oh cool, they accidentally left this adorable little ball of C4 behind. I'm gonna ask him, would you kindly Allahu the shit out of some Akbars for me? The wee lad then scampers up to the soldiers, who evidently have no clue what this thing is, and yet they do not shoot it, despite having had the very concepts of love and family beaten out of them, and so one would think that they would have absolutely no problem shooting the family's weird pet. If this thing was a dog, it would obviously pose a threat, because dogs can be dangerous, and they would obviously shoot it despite the threat being minimal. These soldiers appear to have no clue what this thing is, but they do know that they live in an incredibly vast universe filled with all sorts of weird, wonderful, and occasionally spontaneously combustible creatures, and so the very fact that they do not know what this thing is means that they absolutely should have shot it. Also, sorry to state the obvious, but why did the administrator's family have a highly explosive amphibian as a pet? Also, you could have at least removed the staggering convenience of them accidentally leaving the pet hand grenade behind, and instead have the mother be like, it's dangerous to go alone, husband, here, take this. Which would at the very least mean that this whole scene was not contingent upon them accidentally leaving their pet behind and not realizing. Additionally, not to jump forward too much, but the administrator is not going to survive this opening scene. Which means this whole gambit with the exploding chipmunk could have just not been in the film, although that said, I am glad that it was, because it is by far the funniest moment in either version of Rebel Moon. But anyway, on the plus side, I guess the imagery of religious fundamentalism continues, right? Because this scene has alternated between people being literally branded as pagan witches and coerced suicide bombing. Admiral Noble is on his way to have a word with the administrator. He finds them, and it is revealed that the reason this planet has been purged is because the administrator gave help to a certain group of rebels. You may remember them as the Blood Axes, whom we are told escaped the planet. And don't worry, I shall deal with the Blood Axes later. The administrator begs Noble to spare his family.
But for God's sake, please, I beg you, my wife and children live.
Which is either a slip-up in the script, or it is a clever piece of world-building. Because nothing about Rebel Moon is clever, my money is on the former. This scene has shown us that the Imperium are incredibly devoted to their state religion and their worship of the slain king as a god, or at the very least a godlike entity. They have specifically captured priestesses and denounced them as pagan witches before branding them with the sigil of their own deity. The administrator of this planet has just said, for God's sake, which, yes, is simply a turn of phrase, but in a better movie than Rebel Moon, the writers could have used this choice of words to explore the nature of religious practices within the Imperium. Noble could have responded, God? What do you mean, God? And then proceeded to explain his view that there are no gods, but that Balisarius encourages the deification of the slain king in order to terrify his enemies and to justify an incredible amount of fascistic deprivation of liberty, or something along those lines. That might not be particularly good storytelling, but it would be something to help explain this mess of a setting, and part of the reason why these films are such an incomprehensible mess is because Zack does not seize any opportunity to explore the setting through his characters, and so the use of the phrase, for God's sake, is just a phrase that we use in real life and nothing more. Anyway, Noble reassures him that his bloodline will survive, and that although he is impressed with how he fought, there is still a price to pay for his defiance. Noble then addresses the boy, orders him to stand up, and oh my god, do you know what it's time for? A slow-motion flashback. Zack does actually show some restraint here, and only allows this to continue for about 10 seconds before we snap back to reality, but don't worry, there is an ungodly amount of this film dedicated entirely to slow-motion flashback exposition. If you hadn't worked this out already, this boy is Private Aris, the guy who defects and fights alongside the villagers. Noble tells Aris to bash his father's head in. I can just tell, Zack is about to earn that R rating, isn't he? Only the most mature of content for the Snyderoids. Now, this isn't a bad idea in principle, because it forces Aris to do something incredibly traumatic in order to save his sisters and mother, and it also informs his defection later, as he feels he needs to redeem himself. It is also good character work for the father because he orders Aris to be a man and do what is necessary to save the rest of their family. However, it is a bad idea in execution, pun intended, because this all relies on Noble not just wanting to murder everyone in the room himself. Yes, by doing what he does, he gets to leave with a soldier, but they already wasted uncountable soldiers in taking this planet, and so the value of one soldier is less than minimal. It also relies entirely upon the idea that Noble will indeed keep his word, and he will actually spare the wife and daughters if Aris does as instructed, which he, quite predictably, does not. I also can't help but think that if they hadn't accidentally left their combustible Neopet behind, then this scene would have played out very slightly differently. Just before Aris reluctantly plays whack-a-mole with his father's skull, he is told,
I forgive you.
which obviously mirrors Princess Space Jesus' line to Kora under very similar circumstances.
I forgive you.
Aris is forced to do something he really doesn't want to do, and yet he musters up the courage to do what needs to be done, to become a man and protect his family by killing his father in an extremely brutal fashion. To state the fucking obvious, Aris did not want to bludgeon his father to death, but the film does give us an adequate explanation for why Aris bludgeons his father to death. None of this is true of Kora's own backstory involving her murder of Princess Space Jesus. I won't jump ahead because we don't get that flashback until film 2, but let's just say that the director's cut makes it even worse. Once the deed is done, the priests extract a tooth from the corpse and add it to a tooth tapestry that appears to be dedicated to Princess Space Jesus.
Alright.
Moving on, Noble then scoops out a chunk of the guy's brain and psychically reads the corpse's mind.
You and he made love in the shadow of the banyan tree in the warm summer grass, just when you cried at the birth of your firstborn daughter.
Before he kills the rest of Aris's family. Noble fucking around with the guy's entrails to traumatize the family before he kills them is definitely something that he would do, because he is a hilariously psychopathic lunatic, but why Zack decided that now Noble has the ability to read people's minds by scooping out pieces of their brains is a question that I can't answer. Before we move on, in amongst all this, we get a line from Cassius, Noble's number 2, informing us that Darian and Devra Bloodaxe were present when the Imperium attacked this planet. They failed to defend it, but they managed to escape. Now this goes by pretty quickly, but I do find this extremely funny. The broad strokes of what happened here are that the Bloodaxes took refuge on this planet. The Imperium then attacked the planet, and the Bloodaxes escaped. If you recall, the exact same thing happened in the original cuts, which means that this was not a one-off occurrence. The Bloodaxes have a history and a pattern of getting planets destroyed and then escaping just in the nick of time, leaving their hosts to be annihilated by the Imperium. And if you recall, Darian Bloodaxe says this,
I will not allow another world to fall in our name.
which means they are very aware of the fact that this keeps happening, and yet their actions cause this to happen repeatedly. As the saying goes,
Fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
This scene is actually not terrible, at least not in terms of characterization. Everything else is terrible, but the character work here is better than anything we had in the original cuts, and although it is very simple, it is generally pretty effective. How much of an impact this will have upon the rest of Aris's story, and whether or not this will improve the film as a whole, remains to be seen. We then tie back in with the original cut. We are introduced to Kora, along with Guna, Jarl Balgruuf, and Hagen, all of whom desperately want Kora to fuck Den. Speaking of fucking, we then get some additional fucks.
So fuck hard! Fuck for the gods! Fuck for the very food! Fuck for the harvest!
What did I say? To fuck?
And we then get to see Den plowing Kora. The content of these scenes is identical with regard to characterization, plot, and world building. The only difference is that we get to see Sophia's butellas in a sex scene that lasts for well over 2 minutes. On that thought, to make things simple, I'm not going to bother talking about scenes that are the same as in the original cut, but Zack has added blood and or swearing. Basically every combat scene falls under this banner, so I will just say right now that if you liked the original cut of Rebel Moon, but wished that it had more blood and swearing, then you will enjoy these scenes more in the director's cut, because they have more blood and they have more swearing. My guess, however, is that if you are that person, you are not currently watching this video, you are instead watching the Snyder Cut for the 83rd time. The following morning, Grain? Zack, why? Grain. Have we not had our fill of fucking grain? Apparently not. Zack has decided to add 30 seconds of Guna handing out grain, almost as if he is trying to maximize the grain to screen time ratio. Unfortunately, this is not the last we will see of grain. Anyway, the King's Gaze appears in the sky, and the subsequent scene in which Guna and Jarl Balgruuf tell each other their character traits does change slightly in context with the new scene at the start of the film. We, the audience, know by this point that the Imperium is hunting the Blood Axes, whereas in the original cut we don't learn this until Noble lands and explains this to the villagers. This means that the revelation that Guna has been selling grain to the enemies of the Imperium carries with it a little extra weight, leading to slightly more tension, as we already know exactly what happens to planets that help the enemies of the Imperium. However, this change is negligible because the scene as it exists in the original cut already builds tension, because Jarl Balgruuf specifies that Guna has been selling grain to the enemies of the Imperium. Admiral Noble is also portrayed as being an entirely one-note character, that one note of course being that he is evil, which means that everyone with an IQ above room temperature will have been expecting things to go south the moment he walks out of his dropship. We also see this little kid who suddenly appeared in the original cuts when it was time for Nemesis to go on her motherhood character arc, which means that Zack presumably realized after the films were released, oh shit, we didn't see any kids in part 1. I better throw in a couple of shots of them so that it doesn't look like the kids suddenly teleported in so as to serve as a thematic device. Skipping forward to Noble clobbering Jarl Balgruuf. In the original cut, this is surprisingly brutal and very quick. Noble spins around and immediately knocks the guy to the floor. In the director's cut, things are obviously dialed up to 11, but the alteration to the violence in this scene instead makes it comical rather than shocking. Where the original cut was, for lack of a better word, blunt and impactful, the director's cut is distractingly cartoonish. Rather than thinking, holy shit, this guy just bludgeoned Jarl Balgruuf's head, I am instead thinking, oh, okay, well, Zack wanted to show me the inside of this man's skull. Also, his wife's arm gets cut off because, obviously, this makes the movie better, don't you know? This is the true version of Rebel Moon that fixes all of the problems with the script. Bad writing plus blood is obviously better than bad writing minus blood. And no, this is not at all comparable to the couple of extra shots of violence that I have talked about in my videos covering the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings. The nature of the violence in both versions of The Lord of the Rings is extremely similar, whereas the nature of the violence in the director's cut of Rebel Moon is fundamentally different to how things were depicted in the original cuts. Yes, there is more blood, but the film also focuses on it, presumably for shock value, which definitely gives the impression that Mr. Snyder is trying extremely hard to be as edgy as possible, which is incredibly distracting, especially in a scene like this. But in a film as bad as Rebel Moon, I can't say that I don't get some kind of baseline entertainment from seeing all the different ways Zack chooses to tear people apart. Before the scene ends, this guy of course whips out his tooth tapestry and adds one of Jarl Balgruuf's teeth to it, because this is a thing that they do now. This tapestry has at least 4 different tooth colors on it, so do they put different colored teeth in specific places to make the pattern look right? And if so, how does it work when you get towards the end and the teeth that you get are the wrong color? Are these all human teeth? Presumably they are, as they appear to be of similar size. So what do they do if the leader of a particular village or planet is a non-human, like Squidward? Oh god. They're going to take Squidward's teeth, aren't they? Shortly afterwards, we get an extension to the scene in which the villagers contemplate what to do next.
We could stand and fight.
Hagen wants to stand and fight, but Kora tells them that they cannot fight and that they should run.
I won't leave here.
No, we will stay.
They're right.
Den, however, doesn't want to give up, and the villagers decide that they will stay. What this scene does is that it allows the villagers to contemplate running away. It allows Kora the opportunity to try to convince them to run away, which then also informs her future actions. In the original cut, Kora simply listens to everyone talk about how they trust that Noble will keep his word, and she then leaves them to their fate. In the director's cut, Kora still leaves them to their fate, but at the very least she attempts to convince them to leave the village. Well done, Zack. You may have the smallest of gold stars. Also, in the very next scene, we see that Aris is actually the comms guy. Well done, Zack. You are plugging a couple of the holes in this cheese grater of a vessel. As we see later, Aris communicates directly with Cassius on the King's Gaze multiple times after defecting, and Cassius never once questions, hey, why don't I ever see anyone else over there? You haven't killed them, have you? In my video covering part 2, I suggested that if Aris was the comms guy, then this would make slightly more sense, because it would mean that Cassius would be expecting to be communicating with Aris each time he contacts the garrison of soldiers. Zack has just plugged this hole by showing Aris setting up their comms equipment, thereby suggesting that Aris is indeed the comms guy. It is still, of course, mildly convenient that the only guy who isn't a rapist is the comms guy, but I guess I'll take what improvements I can get. Well done, Zack, you may have a slightly larger gold star. Up next is the barn scene, and I was dreading what Zack was going to do here, given his weird fascination with having his characters get sexually assaulted. This additional line that he threw in earlier also did not fill me with confidence.
That's how I like them. Young. Taste of blood in my mouth when I'm fucking. I like that.
However, by some cosmic miracle, Zack did not fundamentally alter the sequence of events inside the barn. He did not prolong anything, and he didn't allow the soldiers to take things any further than they did in the original cut, and the reason why this is a good thing is because if the soldiers had taken things further, this would have been as a direct result of Kora waiting even longer before deciding to help, which would obviously damage what little character Kora actually has. The barn fight itself contains exactly the same character information, we just get some CGI blood and gore added, including a slow-motion head liquefaction.
Yay!
Kora's first slow-motion flashback exposition dump is obviously longer because what the fuck else were you expecting? Her family is executed while she looks out of a window, and she is spared for some reason. In the original cut, we don't see any of this, and it appears that she is spared because Balisarius is like, oh cool, a little girl. Whereas in the director's cut, Kora had already been spared by the Imperium soldiers. Why they did this?
I have no fucking idea.
It appears that sparing random people is just kind of the way that the Imperium operates. Because this is a Zack Snyder movie intended only for the most adult of adults, we also have the implication that someone is about to be raped. And we also see bodies getting ripped apart by orbital lasers. As I have said before, this is mature content in the most immature of ways. We then get our first expansion on the Kali that I explained about in my previous Rebel Moon video. Much of that information was not in the film and was taken from the official wiki. However, the director's cut is going to elaborate on what the Kali actually are, as we will see later. Kora explains to Guna that the Kali is a being that understands her pain, thereby establishing that the two of them have some kind of emotional connection. This is presumably because Kora considers both of them to be slaves who are being exploited by the Imperium. This doesn't work for a multitude of reasons, but most notably, the Kali is a being that is literally imprisoned and whose physical form is harvested for energy. It does not have a choice, and it is being used in a very literal sense. This is not at all the case with Kora. Yes, she is presumably dealing with some amount of psychological trauma given what happened to her planet and her family, but she has not been imprisoned and exploited in anything like the same way that the Kali has. She has been adopted by a very powerful and influential man. She has been fully embraced into Imperium society, and she has been allowed to excel. The films seem to think that Kora did not have any agency, and that therefore everything that happened to her during her flashbacks, from her being taken by Balisarius to her murdering Princess Space Jesus, it was all just kind of out of her hands, you know? She just kind of had to do it, so she's entirely blameless. Kora continues that organic material is fed into the Kali, and we see that what was once a coal-powered spaceship is now actually a skeleton-powered spaceship, which I don't actually know which is worse. I know which one is more edgy, that's for sure. So these bone shovelers feed bones that they get from somewhere into these furnaces, which is then fed directly into the Kali. Kora says that she doesn't know if these are the bodies of their enemies, and she never asked, but presumably this was indeed the case, which means that after taking over a world, the Imperium will send in a cleanup crew to suck up all of the corpses, load them onto a dropship, and fly them back to the King's Gaze, whereupon they will be made both spooky and scary, and they are then fed to an imprisoned interdimensional energy being. I hope you are keeping track. I also hope Guna is keeping track. I have absolutely no fucking clue why Kora is explaining all of this to Guna, because remember, Zack obviously did not remember, the context for this flashback is that Guna asked her,
"How can you know they will destroy us?"
And in the original cut, Kora explains what happened to her planet and how she went on to fight for the Imperium, thereby explaining how she knows that they will destroy the village. In the director's cut, she, for some reason, also explains how organic matter is fed into an interdimensional energy god that is enslaved by the Imperium and is used to power their battleships. Almost like Zack couldn't think of a better way to give this information to the audience.
You goddamn moron.
Kora continues, and because this film is now 3.5 hours long, she continues to continue. She just won't stop continuing, because gosh darn it, there is just so much crucial information here that Zack needs the audience to hear. Kora explains that she learned the history of the Motherworld.
One myth captured my imagination.
God damn it, Zack. So he's just had Kora say, hello, audience member watching this film. I would like to give you some information that you might need late. I don't even know why I'm trying to explain why not to do this. This is Rebel fucking Moon. So the myth that captured Kora's imagination was the myth of the Chalice, which is our first reference to the title of this version of the film, Chalice of Blood. We learn that there have been at least 2 Princess Isas, and that the myth of the Chalice tells of the first Princess Isa. She was really cool, she fought evil, and was magic. That this is referred to as a myth suggests that this is not a piece of Imperium history set in stone. It is a story that may well have mutated, as it has been passed down over perhaps thousands of years. Kora also explains how she was taken to various planets and was made to watch Balisarius shoot people in slow motion. Okay, are we done? Yep. Yeah. Okay, cool, we're done. This is the mother of all exposition dumps, and this extended flashback that is entirely expository in nature and takes place entirely in slow motion goes on for 11 minutes. No, I am not exaggerating, and I cannot think of a lazier way to deliver information to the audience, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I have come to expect nothing less from Zack Snyder. Critically, however, despite this flashback going on for, again, 11 fucking minutes, Kora does not ever tell Guna why she did any of this. We learn nothing new about her character, despite this flashback being more than double the length that it was in the original cut. The only additional information we learn is that the Kali eats bones, and that there has been at least one previous magic child named Princess Isa. However, credit where credit is due, Zack did remove this entirely pointless line that was present in the original cut.
I'm only telling you this so you know who I am.
I fucking hate movies.
When Kora and Guna arrive at Mos Eisley, Guna forewarns Kora that they are going to a brothel because, yeah, obviously, it's there's the sex, the mature, he's got to have a brothel. The candleman? The candleman tells Tron that her job is to sex people, and she says, ew, I don't want to do that. And then he's like, yeah, well, you got to do it. Intriguing dialogue once again from the master of maturity. Speaking of maturity, Scrotum Man harasses Guna for a little bit longer than he does in the original cut, and Kora just kind of sits there and watches before telling the guy to piss off. Scrotum Man then explains to Kora which part of Guna he is going to put his willy in, and I question my decision to watch this fucking movie. After Kora disarms him, she informs Scrotum Man that the turns have tabled, and it is in fact he who shall be fucked. You did not see this kind of thing happening in Mos Eisley. If only George Lucas was more mature, he could have made something as thought-provoking and intelligent as Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Anyway, the shootout with Scrotum Man is a case of same shit, different toilet, but one thing I will highlight here is that in the original cuts, these weapons were pretty lethal, but in the director's cut, we have seen repeatedly, and in excruciating detail, what these weapons do to the human body. Which makes it even fucking funnier when these same weapons are unable to penetrate a wooden table. God damn it. What's next? At the end of the scene, the nipple robot walks out and does nothing. Meanwhile, we learn that Anthony Botkins helped the Imperium take over many worlds, and he did this in the name of Princess Isa, who was not born yet at that point. Now that he has betrayed the Imperium by killing the Sergeant, he believes that he can feel the princess's hand guiding him as a vessel of righteousness. How do we know this, you may ask? Well, because Zack decided to have Anthony Botkins just say this to himself. Anyway, then we get a new scene on Velt. Aris explains to Sam that he has been sending false status reports to the King's Gaze, and that he would like to assist the villagers in their fight if this is okay with her. This is eye-wateringly simplistic, but it is absolutely better than nothing. The original cuts do not show us anything of Aris and Sam's relationship until the start of part 2, and we are just supposed to infer that things are cool and he's helping now. We then see that they have arrived at Kora's dropship, and fucking hell, why is everything always so blurry? Anyway, this is a reshuffling of events from the original cuts, where they do not recover Kora's ship until they are prepping for battle in part 2. This doesn't change anything narratively, it just shows that the villagers are actually doing something whilst Kora is out gathering her 7 samurai, which is good. It also means that the villagers didn't recover this ship during the 3 days.
It must be done in 3 days' time.
Before the Imperium returned in Part 2, so overall, moving the recovery of Kora's ship to this earlier point in the story is an improvement. Aris is frustrated because he can't fix the ship because he does not have the tools to do so. Sam tells him to rest, but Aris reiterates that he needs to fix it because they will need the ship's guns in the upcoming battle, which is a very funny proposition because they do not use, nor do they need, the ship's guns. The entire plan in Part 2 relies upon the element of surprise, and a giant cannon attached to a dropship is not exactly what you would call stealthy. This ship is used to fly Kora and Guna up to the King's Gaze, and had this single dropship been a part of their battle plan, it would have been deleted immediately by any one of the several other enemy dropships or vehicles. Anyway, he begins to tell Sam what happened to his planet.
I've seen what that ship and the men aboard it are capable of.
But he is unable to continue, presumably because of the trauma of what he was forced to do. Sam recognizes this, and she comforts him. What is going on, Zack? This is not like you. Not only have you turned down the opportunity to have one character tell another character their backstory, but you have also given us character bonding without using dialogue.
It's all right.
Well, mostly without using dialogue. The director's cut obviously does a lot to try and flesh out the character of Aris, but unfortunately in doing so it emphasizes the absurdity that he could possibly think that they stand any chance against the Imperium. He saw what happened to his planet in the opening scene, and he is now in a Viking village with no tools and no technology to work with. He must know they are doomed. But he doesn't, because the script requires that he doesn't. Anyway, later that night, Anthony Botkins sneakily fixes the ship, and Aris deduces that Anthony Botkins must be helping them. I still don't know why the ship needed fixing, because why Kora crashed it is never explained, but in the original cut, the ship is inexplicably not damaged despite having crashed, whereas in the director's cut, the ship is damaged due to the crash, and it is then repaired by Anthony Botkins, which makes this the 3rd or 4th hole that has been plugged. Well done, Zack, only 973 to go. The Tarak scene is virtually identical, except that at the end, the bad man tries to ride the hippogriff before it kills him and red stuff comes out, and then we see it flying around carrying his dismembered body while more red stuff comes out. When they are recruiting Nemesis, however, we get a new scene where they are having something to eat whilst they wait for her to arrive. Kora walks around, and still no one recognizes her as the most wanted fugitive in the known universe. She asks how much longer they are going to wait, and Kai reassures Kora that he has put the word out and that she will come. Now, this sequence of events was anything but efficient in the original cut, but Zack has actually managed to find a way to make this even more inefficient than it already was. The protagonists sit around like, oh no, I'm bored, we should go, can I have some of your food? Don't worry, she'll be here. And this is a complete waste of time. All this communicates is that Kora is very aware of the time constraints on her returning to Velt with her ragtag team of edgy sock puppets, but we already know that she is aware of this. Suddenly, Nemesis.
You're looking for me?
This guy then runs up to Nemesis and begs her for help, as a giant evil spider lady has kidnapped a child, which then leads us into her original introduction scene in the original cut. There is an additional line from Nemesis where she asks if Kai is taking this handful of people to battle officers and soldiers of the realm, and she concludes that this would be suicide. She then says that she will join them because it will mean she gets an opportunity to spill the blood of the officers of the realm.
You're taking this handful against officers and soldiers of the realm.
We are.
Then you know it's suicide.
Yes.
I'll join you if I have a chance to spill the blood of officers of the realm.
The point of this is that it shows that Nemesis is entirely, suicidally, motivated to kill Imperium soldiers. She is at this point entirely consumed by a need for revenge, or justice, I guess. The script is honestly very hazy. The problem is that everything else in this scene, in both versions of the film, indicates that Nemesis is driven by justice, not revenge. She tells the giant spider lady that there is a difference between the two, and she then laments the fact that she had to kill the giant spider lady due to the giant spider lady's own need for revenge. None of this fits with Nemesis being like, hey, sure thing, I'll come with you on a suicide mission, provided I get to kill some Imperium officers, because that is the textbook example of someone seeking revenge, not justice. Additionally, the exact choice of words depicts Nemesis as a colossal tit nugget because the threat faced by the villagers of Velt is not the soldiers. It is not even the planet-destroying spaceship, it is the entire might of the Imperium. They aren't going to lose because they are fighting against the soldiers and officers of the realm. They are going to lose because they are fighting against a universe-spanning, highly militaristic and genocidal superpower. The fight between Nemesis and the giant spider lady is the same as in the original cut, apart from the fact that it undermines the entire character of the giant spider lady. I realize that the giant spider lady is not a character, but bear with me. The whole point of her is that she is pissed off because her eggs are weakened and her children cannot emerge as a result of the polluted air. She can't be a mother, and so she wants to get revenge on the people who poisoned the air by killing their children. This is also meant to serve as a parallel to Nemesis and a warning of where that path leads. So, naturally, Zack undermines this entire concept by having a bunch of little spider babies spill out of the giant spider lady's abdomen when Nemesis slices her open, which means that these little spider babies were seemingly totally fine just chilling in there. The giant spider lady just needed to, poop them out. Maybe these little spider babies are all premature and deformed or whatever, and honestly, had they all come out and just been a giant pile of dead spider babies, then this could have been very effective, as it would have been a visual reminder of why the giant spider lady is doing what she is doing, which could have then made Nemesis's line,
This could easily be any of you lying here in the name of revenge,
slightly more meaningful. Also, and I have no idea why he thought this was a good idea, Zack shows us a sad little spider baby to make sure the audience knows how sad this is. The problem is that this is an extremely funny image, and this is what happens when Netflix gives directors unlimited power to do whatever they want, a mistake they will probably make again. Admiral Noble has just finished having sex with a tentacle monster. Cassius arrives and Noble invites him to join in, before Cassius delivers the same dialogue about the blood axes as in the original cut. One of the tentacles then starts chewing on Admiral Noble's nipple. This makes the film better, guys. This is Zack's true vision. He wants you to see this. He told some poor VFX animator,
all right, so you see this guy's nipple. I just want the tentacle monster to, I just want it to give it a little nibble.
Why, Zack? I mean, I can do it, but I'm just wondering why you want to dedicate time and money into animating that.
Why? What do you mean, why? Why not? The Snyderoids have paid Netflix good money, and I want them to get their money's worth. Now make the space octopus chew on the space Nazi's nipple and stop asking questions.
The next bit, however, I flatly don't want you to see, and to be honest, I'd prefer that this video not be age restricted, so I'm just going to tell you what happens. The tentacle monster shoves a tentacle down Admiral Noble's throat. If you have seen the trailer, then you have already seen this, but it goes on for quite a bit longer in the film. And, I guess the word would be mucus, goo, tentacular lubricant, excretions, ectoplasm, whatever. There is sticky fluid going everywhere, and I really wish that I hadn't seen that. As with most scenes, the narrative and character content of the scenes themselves is virtually identical. The difference is that this time, Zack decided to torture both you and some poor VFX animator. Anyway, next scene. Grain. Anthony Botkins has grain. He continues to grain all over the place and tells himself and the audience that Princess Issa made him a seneschal of her royal house, due to the fact that he drank from the chalice of true belief.
What?
The princess is the chalice. This is one of her many names.
In myth, she was called the Chalice, or the Redeemer.
Anthony Botkins drank from her, which I can't tell if this is a false positive on my part, given what just happened in the previous scene, or if Zack Snyder is fucking weird. Anyway, this doesn't work because Anthony Botkins doesn't have a choice in this. He was programmed to believe that the princess is Space Jesus, and this is made explicitly clear at the end of part 2, so whatever happened to him in his past has nothing to do with him being a true believer in Space Jesus. Now, time for Kora's second exposition dump, which is extended slightly. The king references someone called Bartholomew and the Order of 12, but we are not told who or what these are. The king tells Kora that he is pleased that she has been assigned as Issa's bodyguard, because Issa likes Kora. Kora reiterates how much she likes Issa and how kind Issa is, which makes the fact that she murders Issa that much funnier. In this scene, we also see more robots that are protecting the royal family, which is good, because this is what we are told they did. Next scene, grain, robot, grain, slow motion, grain. This is the third time you have done this, Zack. Our protagonists then arrive on Space Rome, where there is more red stuff and body parts. Tarak, revealing himself to be cognitively challenged, concludes that this dude standing right next to them must be General Titus, because he has the bearing of a general.
What about that man there? He looks like he's got the bearing of a general. Yeah, it must be Titus.
General! This is an intelligent film for grown-ups.
This guy is obviously not Titus, but quite luckily for our protagonists, he knows exactly where to find Titus, and he instructs a cat person to take them to him. The way this plays out in the original cut is that they land on Space Rome, and we see them encounter Titus after the cat person has led them to him. This doesn't cause any problems because we can infer that off-screen they asked around and found someone who knew where to find him. We don't need to see this to accept that this is what happened. The director's cut, however, shows that they saw a guy who looked kind of generally.
In what way? Oh, just in a general kind of way.
And he, the first person they spoke to, knew exactly where to find Titus, which is just incredibly lucky, and I don't know why you would throw conveniences like this into your story when this part of the story was already coherent to begin with. Titus then throws abuse at Kora and her team.
No courage, no courage. You bastard cowards! You're cowards! Cowards! I'll kill you!
I don't know why he does this or why he thinks this, but I guess he's just crazy. All they have done is given him a shower. Nothing they have done is cowardly, and there is nothing stopping him from trying to kill them right now. Anyway, then we get a slight change to the following dialogue. Kora asks if he is not General Titus, the defender of the innocent and the oppressed. This line made me seriously question whether or not Zack reads his own scripts. General Titus's backstory, as we learn in Part 2, is that he was a decorated general of the Imperium, a fascistic and oppressive intergalactic genocidal superpower. One day, he was ordered to fire upon civilians, and he refused, because I guess he managed to rise through the ranks of such a military without ever having to do anything that caused him to question his sense of right and wrong. The Imperium then blew up the planet anyway and let him live for some reason. What part of this makes him a defender of the innocent and the oppressed? The best faith interpretation of General Titus is that he did very bad things, then he decided enough is enough and refused to continue doing very bad things. So Balisarius did the bad thing anyway after his refusal. This suggests that General Titus didn't want to be doing bad things, not that he is a defender of the innocent and the oppressed. Kora described him earlier in the film as once a hero of the realm who turned his own soldiers against the Motherworld. But I guess General Titus ends up becoming a defender of the innocent and the oppressed by the end of Part 2, so we gotta get that line in somewhere for narrative cohesion, despite there being no reason why Kora would believe this to be the case. Skipping forward to Sharan, the protagonists talk about the sky, and this leads into by far the biggest improvement so far over the original cuts. A massive point of criticism against the original cuts is how and when Zack decided to explain everyone's backstories. What this scene does instead is it implies things about Tarak's history through dialogue from other characters, thereby suggesting that Tarak feels guilty about something that he did in his past, rather than simply having him say to the Hamburglar, "I too am acquainted with the emotion of guilt." This is not particularly good, but something being not particularly good is still a huge improvement over doing a literal backstory round table. Anyway, Tarak looks at the sky and points out where he was born. Kora asks why he did not return there, and Titus says that there would be nothing there for him to return to, as everyone was either killed or enslaved by the Motherworld. Kora asks Tarak how he survived, and Nemesis realizes that Tarak fled when his planet was attacked, and Kai concludes that Tarak is a coward. Titus, however, says that it is good that Tarak has decided to fight with them now, which lines up with what little we know of him, as his whole deal is redemption and second chances. Kai then insults Titus, and Gunnar prevents a fight from breaking out. Again, this is not good, because these characters are floppier than a bowl of spaghetti, but it is far better than what we got in the original cut, which was virtually nothing. Nemesis and Titus each have more dialogue in this scene than they do in the rest of the film after they are each recruited, and we also learn about Tarak both through character-driven exposition and through Tarak's reaction to this exposition. Well done, Zack. You have constructed a scene that is passable. When they speak with the Bloodaxes in the original cut, Darian Bloodaxe decides to help because he feels guilty about the village of Velt being under threat due to the fact that they sold grain to his rebels.
Their village is now threatened by Admiral Noble in pursuit of your revolution.
I will go.
This is not actually true, and there is no reason why Darian Bloodaxe would believe it to be true, but because no one in these movies talks like a normal fucking person, no one questions this. In the director's cut, however, he decides to help because he is impressed by Gunnar, the farmer, because Gunnar currently has a chance to run from the Imperium, and yet he is committed to returning and fighting for his home. This is far better characterization and makes vastly more sense, and informs us of what Darian Bloodaxe actually values, without having him say, "Hello, I am Darian Bloodaxe. My values are honor, loyalty, and bravery." Anyway, King Squidward, it is time to add your teeth to the tooth tapestry. Look, there he is. The tooth guy is just standing there waiting to complete his masterpiece. Yes, add the teeth. Add the teeth! Zack, you are fucking weird. What the hell is the point of this? In the next scene, we get a minor change to Kai's dialogue. After he explains to Kora that he wants to settle his ties to his life as a thief before joining them in defense of the village, in the original cut, he says,
"Besides, you said yourself you need me."
Whereas in the director's cut, he says,
"Besides, deal's the deal, even amongst scum."
There are things we can draw out of each of these lines. The original cut indicates that Kai is having a bit of banter with Kora, whereas the director's cut suggests that he does actually keep his word, even though he may not be a very nice person. This line works slightly better in my view because it feeds into his betrayal, and so although both versions function so as to make Kora believe that he is on her side before he ultimately betrays them, the line in the director's cut specifically references the fact that he is trustworthy, whereas the original cut instead shows that he is a likable and somewhat charismatic person. Dare I say, the only charismatic person in the universe of Rebel Moon. Next up, Anthony Botkins is back, but this time there is no grain. This time he's in the woods. There is a deer and he's got antlers now. I don't know why anyone, including myself, even bothered to speculate as to why and how this happened, because all that happened is that he sat next to a deer and was like,
"I'm going to whack me off a piece of that."
Anyway, Anthony Botkins walks into grain, Zack. How many grains does it take to Zactivate a light bulb? How many grains do we need to see? How many times do we need to see a robot stroking the grain? Anyway, he then says to himself and the audience that Princess Issa was really kind and shit, and she gave him a nice hat, and then she cried all over him and baptized him in a monsoon of anguish, or to use the words Zack actually wrote,
"The tears falling upon my face were a baptism, and I felt the blessed rapture of peace."
I don't know what to say about this, other than that a large chunk of this additional footage is dedicated to Anthony Botkins telling himself about how cool Space Jesus is. During the climactic battle, everything is basically the same, aside from a few heads being blown apart and or chopped off. We have Darian Bloodaxe killing an entire Death Star, the Hamburglar making everyone laugh again, and inconsistent weapon damage. In fact, the projectile weaponry in these films doesn't seem to actually do anything to anything, unless it makes contact with a human body, in which case everything explodes in a glorious fountain of splatter porn. Almost as if these projectiles and the impacts they make were added digitally after the fact, with very little care or consideration for how they would affect their surroundings.
But random, obviously they are added digitally. Zack doesn't have access to real spaceships or laser rifles.
Shut the fuck up, retarded alter ego. Yes, obviously Zack was not able to create real laser guns for his little sci-fi movie. Thank you for pointing that out, you tremendous brainlet. That does not mean that you cannot properly and realistically and consistently integrate these non-existent weapons into your scenes. All it requires is a little forethought and planning to make the visual effects properly sell the supposed impact and destructive power that these weapons have. Anyway, Kora's climactic fisticuffs with Admiral Noble are exactly the same as they are in the original, the exception being that the odd bone pops out here and there. However, at the end, when Kora delivers the killing blow, all of his teeth fly out, as in the original cut. The difference here is that in this film, Admiral Noble has been a tooth collector of sorts. He has been getting the teeth of the people who he hits with the stick, and so Kora has instead knocked out his teeth with the stick. I guess that has some kind of through line, right? I'm trying here. Zack also fixed a continuity problem from the original cuts, and remembered that when someone gets their teeth removed from their jaw, the teeth don't magically come back a couple of hours later. They stay gone, and so the next time we see Admiral Noble, he is indeed missing most of his teeth. At least until he is healed aboard the King's Gaze. Well done, Zack. This is indeed your true vision. And not a case of, oh shit, I made a very obvious mistake that no one should have made and now I get the chance to fix it because Netflix wanted to double dip on my insane pitch of an adult take on Star Wars. Also, Zack, sorry to point this out, but you forgot to fix the inconsistency with the smoke coming from the dropships, disappearing and then reappearing in between shots. Anyway, as the heroes arrive back on the Rebel Moon, Guna pays a guy for the space horses, but oh no, a couple of Uruk-Hai are watching and being all sneaky and shit. Whatever will this lead to? Probably something that was removed from the original cut because it was not needed to tell the story. As the Seven Samurai ride back to the village, the Uruk-Hai are also here, in secret and through no apparent means, other than the fact that Zack wanted them to be here now. Stay tuned to see what he ends up doing with them. It's a fucking doozy. In the final scene of the film, one of the priests says hello to the Kali, and this appears to open a wormhole, although this one looks decidedly less vagina-y than the one we saw in the original cut. As this happens, we hear screams and somber music, and the Kali then sheds a single tear, in slow motion of course, and the film clearly wants us to feel sorry for this creature. When they need to, they can just zap from one part of the universe to another, which means that the ship can teleport, which means they don't need the fucking grain from Velt unless there is no better source of food anywhere else in the known universe. It is implied that the Kali do have limits, as we learn in a later scene that the Kali was exhausted by the jump from Sharan to Gondival, which means that there is a limit to this power. They can't simply zap themselves all over the universe 100 times in a single day. This also means that Cassius elected to use this limited power to go to Gondival upon hearing that Noble had possibly been killed, which is good because it is the only real moment of characterization Cassius receives in these films. He could have returned to the Motherworld, as is protocol, and potentially then be made the official admiral of the King's Gaze, but he instead chose to use a limited resource because there was a slim chance that he would be able to recover Noble, his superior. Unfortunately, this doesn't explain why they never consider using warp travel to get food from anywhere else, but this is a fundamental problem with the setup of these films, so I won't even try to re-rationalize that. We have now reached Part 2, The Curse of Forgiveness. Like Part 1, Part 2 removes the Anthony Botkin's voiceover, and we jump straight into the bone shovelers shoveling bones into the furnace, in slow motion, obviously, in order to feed the imprisoned interdimensional energy beings so that they can power their ship and jump through wormholes. It really feels like Zack is building up to something insane happening later in the film, which may or may not have been partially spoiled in the trailer. The tech priest then refers to the Kali as an ungrateful bitch, which is obviously intended to make us feel further sympathy for the Kali, and to reinforce how evil the Imperium is. Why exactly the tech priest believes that the Kali should be grateful to the Imperium for enslaving her and exploiting her energy to power their ships is never addressed. But of course it doesn't need to make any sense from his perspective. It only needs to inform the audience that the Imperium is evil. Meanwhile, the Uruk-Hai continue to spy on the village and they set up a transmitter. Anthony Botkins is watching them. The next time we see Anthony Botkins is when he is listening to Titus singing, which presumably means he dispatched the Uruk-Hai off-screen, making me wonder what purpose they served. But god damn it, I was wrong, and you will have to wait and see what happens. Kora and Guna then have hot, sweaty farm sex, and we get to see Sophia's Butellas a second time, and their relationship is at this point just as meaningless as it is in the original cut, because the film expects the viewer to just accept that they are in love, because the script says they are in love. However, given that I know where this story goes, and given that there is a big emotional payoff that relies entirely upon Kora and Guna's romance, I do actually like the idea of showing a sex scene at this point in the story. This also happens later, less explicitly, when we see them make out briefly during the grain montage. Seeing them engage in the physical act of lovemaking is entirely appropriate, again, given where the story goes, because it theoretically makes it easier to accept the relationship that they have, which then, theoretically, makes the emotional gut punch at the end of the film hit with some amount of force, rather than hitting with the force of being tickled with a deflated balloon. Conceptually, showing a sex scene at this point is an idea that I can get behind. Whether the scene needed to go on for nearly 4 minutes is a different question, however, and the answer to that question is no. Because instead of being emotionally engaging, cathartic, or helping the audience to understand the relationship that these two have, it is instead gratuitous and far more focused on depicting the physical act of porking than accomplishing anything for either character. Now we get to jump into Kora's backstory regarding the assassination of the royal family. First off, the director's cut recontextualizes the nature of the king of the Imperium.
Word had reached him that his most celebrated general fought without honor. His main weapons were slaughter and cruelty.
It is revealed that the king was unaware of what Balisarius was doing. He was unaware of the fact that the Imperium's military was slaughtering its way through the universe, burning down orphanages, kicking puppies, and making teeth mosaics, and the king is mortified after realizing what Balisarius has done with the power he has been given. This is much clearer than in the original cut, where the king is portrayed very much as a good person, and the extreme dissonance of such a person ruling over such an absurdly bloodthirsty faction is simply not addressed. Zack does address this dissonance during this very scene in the director's cut, however, and all it requires is that we accept that the king somehow did not know what Balisarius was doing. Balisarius doesn't appear to be particularly secretive about his activities. The king must obviously know that wars are fought frequently given the scale of their military, not to mention the fact that the king knows what a Kali is, and so presumably he knows that his warships literally do not function unless you feed them the corpses of your enemies, and so quite how he rationalizes that I have no idea. But even if we just take what Zack has told us and don't think about it, this still means that the king is incredibly incompetent for not noticing what Balisarius was doing. In the original cut, it is unclear whether the king is good or evil, and he seems inexplicably to simultaneously be both. In the director's cut, however, it is instead very clear that the king is tremendously incompetent. This tweak does also provide a motivation for Balisarius assassinating the royal family. In the original cut, he was just like, yeah, I'd like to be in charge, please. Whereas in the director's cut, he hates the fact that the king took command of the military away from him. Overall, this is an improvement. Kora explains that she believes that the king should have destroyed both Balisarius and her, but the king simply lets Balisarius off with a warning.
The king loved him, and even through his rage saw him as a son.
And he allows Kora to remain as Princess Space Jesus' personal bodyguard. See, this is where we get into the dissonance issue again. You can't tell me that the king is a super chill guy who loves his people and he's really nice, etc., and he's furious when he finds out that Balisarius has been murdering his way through the universe, blowing up planets whenever they are late paying their taxes, but then also tell me that his response to this revelation is to make Balisarius a senator. Because the king is an idiot, and because Balisarius is very obviously evil and incredibly ambitious, he overperforms as a politician, which leads to him getting support from the other senators, ultimately allowing him to assassinate the king. This would be good storytelling if a particular character flaw caused the king to be too trusting and too naive to see the assassination coming, as his attempt to fix the problem of Balisarius being a genocidal maniac without pissing off Balisarius ended up causing his own death. The problem with how this goes down is that the king is depicted as unbelievably trusting and naive, given that he is the king of a universe-spanning mega-faction, and given that Balisarius is as evil and sadistic as they come. We learn in a later scene that, quote, "every child screaming, every mother crying," is a well-known quote that originates with Balisarius, and this quote originates from his time as a fighting man. If this quote is so well known amongst the Imperium's military, how can the king not have the slightest inkling that this Balisarius fellow might be a teeny tiny bit of a psychopathic mass murderer? And what does the king do with such a person once this is revealed? He decides to give Balisarius a significant amount of political power, which is one of the worst things he could have possibly done. If this was all more coherent, and if the characters of the king and Balisarius were vastly more fleshed out than they are, then all of this could have worked, as the fundamental idea is solid. The problems are that both the king and Balisarius' character traits are dialed up well past the point of absurdity, making the whole thing an exercise in absurdism. This change also clarifies Balisarius' plan involving Kora. He did not plan to use Kora as a scapegoat from the very start, because when he adopted Kora, he had no intention of assassinating the king. This was instead a lucky coincidence, and he was able to exploit the fact that she was already the bodyguard of the princess to make this happen. Sometime afterwards, Balisarius informs Kora that he is unhappy that the king has planned to abdicate and pass rulership on to Princess Space Jesus.
He also plans to disband the Empire and execute the generals.
I'm sorry, he plans to do what?
To execute the generals.
What is happening?
Not only is the king going to demilitarize entirely, but he is also going to execute every single one of his generals. I'll remind you that the Imperium is vast, which means that the king is going to kill a lot of people. This kind of thing is not unheard of, but it is somewhat dictatory and, Stalin-y. But the film has spent quite a lot of time trying to depict the king as a kind-hearted man who wants the best for his people. Suddenly dropping, oh yeah, he's also going to execute hundreds, if not thousands, of his own loyal generals, further adds to the incomprehensible characterization in Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Anyway, Balisarius informs Kora that when the cleansing begins, both of them will be the first ones to go, and he proceeds to convince Kora to murder a little girl.
We can't allow that, can we? The realm is more than you or I or some little girl, and it will not be sacrificed in the guilt of a spineless king.
What can we do?
Kill him! Kill them both!
Arthurleus, you are my family. When I am Regent Militarium, you won't be the servant of the princess. You will take her place.
I can't watch anymore.
How much damage can one line do? Not only did Kora willingly murder a little girl, but she did so because she wanted to be a princess herself. She wanted to be worshipped and loved in the same way that Princess Space Jesus was. We already know that Kora was obsessed with the myth of the Chalice, which tells the story of the first Space Jesus, so it is also entirely possible that she was willing to murder the current Space Jesus in order to become the new Space Jesus.
There can be only one.
Balisarius has just told Kora that he plans to assassinate the royal family, and we already know that Kora is very friendly with the king, and that she is very close with the princess, and that she has every reason to despise Balisarius, except that the film never really explains why she doesn't, so I guess she doesn't, and yet Kora does not at any point even consider warning the king of the impending betrayal. Worse still, she takes part in the betrayal. Worse still, she murders the princess herself. Worse still, she does this for entirely selfish reasons. This is catastrophically bad in the original cut because the explanation we get is that Kora did this because Balisarius asked her to.
I was the loyal daughter of my adopted father. He had told me the princess must die, and die she would.
But the director's cut somehow managed to find a way to make it even fucking worse.
You won't be the servant of the princess. You will take her place.
Anyway, they get assassinated. It's all the same, it's just a bit more gooey. There's no robots in the assassination scene, despite the fact that in the director's cut, we have seen the robot bodyguards protecting the king in every single scene, and yet no explanation is ever given for why they were not present. The script simply decided that they were not there, because if they had been there, then Zack would have needed to account for them, and given how incredibly powerful they are, there is no way for Zack to account for them. The solution? Ignore them. Because remember, if they are off-screen, they do not exist. In total, this extended flashback is drawn out for 11 minutes and makes Kora's characterization even less coherent and depicts her as even more of a despicable human being than she was in the original cut. Before everyone starts graining, Gunnar says a few words.
We have a few people here who probably have never harvested grain before.
Fuck you!
During the slow-motion grain montage, Nemesis fucks around with her swords instead of harvesting grain, and the kids are fascinated. This is good because it plays into her thematic arc involving motherhood and finding a purpose beyond vengeance, but this is bad because I don't know why she is doing this. The grain montage itself is also extended to a rather incredible 9 minutes, and whilst it does contain more character information than it did in the original cut, it is also 9 minutes of a film almost entirely dedicated to showing the process of harvesting grain. Up next, we get some tweaks to the various backstories during the backstory round table. In Titus's backstory, after Balisarius nukes Titus's soldiers from orbit, we see that Titus is being guarded by 3 soldiers, and he is forced to watch. He breaks free, and these 3 soldiers display unfathomably slapstick levels of incompetence. None of them react when he frees himself, and one of them accidentally shoots his buddy in the face for good measure. This change accomplishes nothing narratively, and all it does is that it gives Zack another chance to show 3 people being killed in an overly bloody and absurd manner. And if that's what Zack wants to do, then more power to him. But I really wish he would find ways to indulge in this fetishistic obsession with slow-motion mutilation that doesn't damage the intelligence of the characters or factions in question. Next up is the Hamburglar's backstory, which is extended. We learn that she lived on planet Grain, and she grained all day and she grained all night, and everyone happily grained together until they were invaded and executed next to all of the grain. The Hamburglar was then taken away from her beloved grain and forced into slave labor, as seen in the original cut. Nemesis's extended backstory shows us her burying her dead children, and apart from that, it's identical. These changes prolong what is already an indefensibly lengthy sequence dedicated entirely to "Hello, let me tell you my backstory" 4 fucking times. I can't really say it is worse than in the original cut, because very few scenes that have ever been filmed are worse than this scene in the original cut. But it isn't exactly an improvement either. So you remember the scene when Sam gives everyone these little knitted thingies that tell them their character traits? Well, in the director's cut, Zack has decided to show us the process of making these little embroidered towel thingies. What are you doing, people? You have a rather strict time limit. Why are you knitting? Why are you playing songs? You need to gather an insane amount of grain in 3 days. What the fuck is going on?
Okay, teach me.
Stop it, Zack. We don't need a scene where some bint teaches Tarak how to dance. Anyway, Hagen later tells the Hamburglar that she was notably skilled at grain. The Hamburglar replies that she grew up surrounded by grain. Den also receives a gift this time around, and Sam tells him that he is as the land beneath their feet, rising to defend them. On the tapestry, to no one's surprise, is grain. Sam takes Aris to the roof, and he is seriously impressed by the view. This is the view. It is a blurry, oversaturated orange smudge. I can't tell what I'm looking at. There are mountains, and I know for a fact there is grain in there somewhere, but like this thing here, I don't know what this is, because looking at this shot makes me feel like I need to get my eyes tested. Anyway, they have a chat, and I don't care, but I do appreciate the fact that Zack is actually dedicating a scene showing two characters bonding with each other. Sam asks Aris to stay with her if they survive, and they kiss. This is really, really basic stuff. But this is also a step up from the original cuts, which were incapable of doing really, really basic stuff. I mean, the director's cuts are also broadly incapable of doing really, really basic stuff, but what, twice now we've actually gotten a fully coherent scene of character development.
Oh no, disgusting. Pressing their mouths together.
Why the fuck are you alive? Anthony, why didn't you rip this guy's spine out of his mouth in slow motion? You knew these fuckers were here, and you knew that they were spying on the village. So the Uruk-Hai were able to set up this little transmitter and send a message to the King's Gaze because Anthony Botkins booted into special mode that morning. The following day, the Uruk-Hai see that the villagers have a dropship and they begin to transmit a message to the King's Gaze.
Just discovered.
I am fucking struggling with this, so Anthony Botkins waited until they were actually in the process of contacting the King's Gaze before deciding to stop them. This also means that there is absolutely no reason for these Uruk-Hai to exist within the film. They follow the protagonists to the village, they spy on them, and then they are killed before they can do anything. What is the fucking point? Well, the point is that these Uruk-Hai are 3 more bodies that Zack can tear apart. And when you tear them apart, red stuff comes out. I like it when the red water comes out, Zack. Thank you, Daddy. Please more. Oh god, what has this man done to my brain? Anthony Botkins then shows Kora the destroyed transmitter that the Uruk-Hai were using to communicate with the King's Gaze.
By now, they know everything.
This motherfucker. So this is a double tap of retardation. We know that the King's Gaze knows nothing, because Anthony Botkins attacked the Uruk-Hai before they could say anything. The only way that Anthony Botkins could believe that the Uruk-Hai have already told the King's Gaze anything, let alone everything, is if he knowingly and willingly allowed them to do so. Yes, the film has already implied that Anthony Botkins did precisely this, because Zack showed us that Anthony Botkins was aware of these Uruk-Hai, and he was keeping an eye on them whilst they spied on the village. What has just happened, however, is that the film has made explicit that Anthony Botkins knew that the Uruk-Hai were in contact with the King's Gaze, and he did not intervene. The sock puppets convene and they decide that as the King's Gaze knows everything, they cannot just strategize defensively. They must also bring the fight to their enemy, and so they devise a plan for Kora to board the ship, as happens in the original cut. This means that the actual purpose of this little subplot with the Uruk-Hai is to give Kora a reason to want to board the King's Gaze. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because if boarding the King's Gaze and sabotaging it was always a possibility, then why would you only decide to do it now? Not to mention the fact that if you are working under the presumption that the enemy knows everything, then this means that they also know about your dropship. Shortly before the battle, Tarak has sex with an old woman, and we get to see her comfort melons. When Guna goons all over the place and initiates combat, the ship explodes in slow motion, as in the original cut, but this time we also get a slow motion close-up of the tooth tapestry burning away. Well, that's the end of that, I guess. If an archaeologist ever comes to Veld in a few thousand years, they are going to be incredibly confused. Anyway, Zack then makes another improvement, because even a broken idiot will be right twice in a Rebel Moon, and he allows Kora a chance to ask Guna what the fuck he is doing.
Why did you stop me?
In the original cut, Guna initiates combat against Kora's wishes, and then neither of them mention this at any point, despite the fact that Kora was entirely willing to turn herself in, and Guna's actions will have caused a lot of needless death. The director's cut, however, allows Kora the opportunity to ask him what he is doing.
You know he would have said anything to have you surrender without the fight, but his words are worthless.
This is actually not a bad explanation. We know that Noble would not keep his word, Kora would also know this, and Guna would have every reason to believe this. If Kora had gone with Noble, the village would have been nuked from orbit. The village can, of course, still be nuked from orbit, which, come to think of it, is actually a reason for Kora to stay in the village, as the only thing preventing Noble from doing so is the fact that he wants Kora alive. During the fighting, I can't help but notice that Zack has such a fascination with blood and guts that he even adds it when it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Take this shot for instance, just after the guy gives this woman a backwards gun and she gets her neck snapped. Noble walks up to the guy and takes his knife. The knife appears to have been attached to the guy's belt, and yet, when Noble takes the knife, the next shot appears as though he has just stabbed the guy in the chest. Is this a simple continuity error, or did Zack add blood because he saw a knife and he thought, "Oh boy, knives make blood, quick, add some blood"? As Kora and Guna approach the King's Gaze, we see them applying blood to themselves to trick the medical team into believing that they are injured. Step 1 of war crime complete. If any part of the story needed fixing, it was this. Actually, saying that, this is a film in which the protagonist murders a little girl because she wanted to be a princess, so yeah, the holes in this cheese are more hole than cheese. Actually, to continue this terrible metaphor, which is still somehow smarter than anything in Rebel Moon, Zack has taken his cheese and filled the holes with blood. Rather than fixing anything that needed fixing, he has just decided to add bodily fluids instead. Naturally, this means that when Kora and Guna commit a war crime, we get to see her spatter the medical team all over the elevator. A mature take on Star Wars, indeed. Anyway, upon arriving at the engine room containing the Kali, Kora starts to place bombs on its face, as in the original cut, suggesting that at this point, her motivation is the same. She wants to blow up the King's Gaze, and in order to do so, she has to murder a prisoner. The one marginal upside to how this is depicted in the director's cut, however, is that we have clearly been shown that the Kali is a prisoner and that it is suffering. And so the intention was likely that Kora was putting it out of its misery. But the fact remains, she is murdering a prisoner who perhaps does not want to die, and a prisoner who doesn't appear to currently be conscious. And this makes me wonder, if the Kali were to open its eyes and say, "Yo, what the fuck, don't put bombs on my face," would Kora listen and find some other way to blow up the King's Gaze without killing the Kali? The answer can only be that no, she would not. Anyway, then this happens. Putting this in the trailer is a fucking lie, because it is revealed in about 30 seconds that this is a dream sequence. The Kali is still trapped, and so either Kora is just imagining this, or the Kali is psychically communicating with Kora whilst comatose. It reassures Kora that killing it is the only way to destroy the King's Gaze. Obviously, destroying the King's Gaze is only a short-term victory, and it will mean very little going forward. Then the Kali says,
"So like you saw, I too forgive you."
Fuck you, Zack, this is not comparable. I see what you were doing, and you can't play your dirty tricks on me. I see through your smoke and mirrors and blood and cheese and grain and old lady boobs. I know what your game is. This film has been retitled Rebel Moon: The Curse of Forgiveness. The idea being that Zack wants there to be a thematic through line in which Kora is cursed, haunted, or traumatized by the fact that she is forgiven for doing bad things, and she does not believe that she is worthy of this forgiveness. Let's get one thing out of the way first. She is not worthy of forgiveness. Now, when she murdered Issa, she did this for entirely selfish reasons. She did this because Balisarius asked her to, and because he said she would replace Issa after her death. Issa forgiving her makes very little sense because this is the ultimate betrayal, and so we can only chalk this down to Issa being Space Jesus and therefore being super forgivian shit, and perhaps her being able to read Kora's soul and know that deep down she isn't really a child murderer, unless of course she is given a little push, plus the obvious religious parallel that Jesus forgave Judas after Judas betrayed him. In this scene, the Kali demonstrates that it is psychic, as it knows that Issa forgave Kora previously. It then also forgives Kora for killing it out of necessity, because it also wants the King's Gaze to be destroyed, and presumably it also wants to be put out of its misery. The difference here is that Kora's intention was to blow up a prisoner for the greater good, to protect the village, which is not exactly what you would call an obviously moral action, whereas when she killed the princess, she did not do this for the greater good. She did this for herself. And for some reason, everyone Kora either kills or tries to kill keeps forgiving her for being an evil bitch. The Kali tells Kora that one day she will wake her sisters and that the other Kali will take revenge on this Kali's behalf. So if freeing the other Kali is an option, why not free this one? Is this something you can just kind of do? Does this imprisoned interdimensional energy being have any secret knowledge that maybe it might want to tell Kora regarding how to free it? In my initial reaction to the trailer, my guess was that Kora was indeed going to free this Kali, and it would then go on a rampage throughout the ship and bring it down, before blasting off into space. This would mean that we would reach the exact same conclusion, but we avoid the moral landmine of Kora placing explosive charges on the forehead of a comatose prisoner. But that is still exactly what has happened here. The only difference is that after placing explosive charges on the forehead of a comatose prisoner, the best faith interpretation I can give is that this prisoner psychically communicated with Kora and said, "It's okay, I know you need to do this for the greater good." Alternatively, maybe Kora felt really guilty about all this, so she imagined the Kali forgiving her in order to make her feel better about the whole thing, which would then mean that the curse of forgiveness is a literal curse, as Kora keeps doing really bad shit but then justifies this to herself by imagining that her victims are forgiving her as she blows them up. Either way, why is this in the film? What function does this serve? Kora has a vision where the engine of the ship tells her to free the other engines, but Kora neither has the opportunity to free the other engines, nor does she voice any kind of desire to do so in future. I guess we will have to stay tuned for the R-rated director's cut of Rebel Moon Part 5 to see what happens. As the battle rages, there is I hesitate to say nice, but there is a moment during the battle where the Hamburglar is being overwhelmed, and Tarak decides to jump out of the trenches to rescue her against Titus's wishes.
No, I'm going. No, you can't help them.
This contains clear character information. Titus was acting as the pragmatic and unemotional leader, believing that the Hamburglar was dead either way. Tarak instead believed he could save her, which adds a tiny bit of context to their later dialogue.
I thought dying in battle was all I wanted. Fighting for something. I think I was wrong.
Wow, that's really insensitive.
Quite obviously, all of the Imperium soldiers forget how to use their weapons so that Tarak can mow through them with an axe, which honestly is par for the course at this point. Anthony Botkins then arrives to help, as he does in the original cut, but his actions go from strange and counterintuitive to downright inexplicable in the director's cut. In the original cut, we don't really know what's going on with him, other than that his ones and zeros are all fucky, and he maybe thinks that Sam is the reincarnation of Princess Issa. We honestly don't know. Maybe he sat out of the battle because his brain was broken, and then he changed his mind and decided to help. This is fucking terrible, and it is not character motivated. It relies entirely on our lack of understanding of the character of Anthony Botkins in order to function. In the director's cut, however, we have seen in detail what this character has been doing. We have had 5 new scenes showing him repairing the ship, taking out the Uruk-Hai, talking to himself about how the princess's hand is guiding him as a vessel of righteousness, talking to himself about how he drank from the chalice of true belief, and talking to himself about how she baptized him with her tears. This is largely meaningless pseudo-intellectual edgy bullshit, but the fact remains. Showing us this character going through all of this and still sitting out the entire battle, only to arrive after many, many people have died, when he evidently could have easily soloed most of the ground forces, is inexplicable. Zack then, unfortunately and rather confusingly, clarifies whether or not the King's Gaze actually needed the grain from the village. After Noble orders to fire on the village, Cassius reminds him of grain and that they need grain, and Noble responds that no, they don't need grain because the Scargiver has come to them. This raises a whole load of questions that I won't go into here because I've already done that in my video on part 2, but in the director's cut, Noble continues,
I'd rather our men starve than risk exposing ourselves to more of Titus's dirty tricks.
This, unfortunately for Mr. Snyder, confirms that the King's Gaze does indeed need the grain from Velt in order to sustain the crew back to the Motherworld.
I'd rather our men starve.
This confirms that the Motherworld has no established supply lines, and bear in mind, of course, that the King's Gaze is capable of warp travel. Meanwhile, Gunnar overhears a couple of Imperium officers telling him exactly what he needs to hear in an extremely clunky manner. Hello, other officer, have you heard the news? We are going to vaporize the village with our big guns.
You'll never guess what I just heard. The Admiral has decided to vaporize the village with our big guns here on the King's Gaze.
No, other officer, I hadn't heard. Thank you so much for telling me in a very loud and expository manner. I do like using our big guns. Gunnar then radios Kora and informs her that Noble doesn't give a shit about the grain and he wants to blow the village up instead. This then prompts Kora to go to the firing deck to save the village. She explodes everyone's heads, and this is what prevents the guns from hitting the village in the director's cut, which actually fixes a problem with the original cut, where it is simply incredibly lucky that the ship exploded just as they were firing their big guns. In the director's cut, Kora heads to the firing deck specifically to prevent them from firing their big guns, And whilst, yes, it is still lucky that she arrives in time, this is far better than having two totally separate things happen at the same time, which just so happens to save everyone's lives. Then we get this.
Please! I have a family!
Kora shows absolutely no remorse. Zack did not need to show this. Zack has gone out of his way to depict Kora as a person who is willing to execute prisoners, laborers, medics, and unarmed children. She will kill because someone asked her to. She will kill because she will benefit from killing. She will kill because it is convenient for her to kill. This character is a complete clusterfuck, and I have no idea why Zack would want us to see her execute an unarmed man who has just begged for his life and told her that he has a family. Yes, I know he was about to destroy a village, and had Kora killed this guy in the process of rescuing the village, then this would have been perfectly acceptable. The rest of the guys in this room were fair game, because they were active combatants who were either in the process of firing upon a village full of people, or they presented a potential threat to her, as they presumably had ready access to guns of their own. The fact is that after destroying the targeting system, Kora did not need to execute this guy, and Zack did not need to put Kora in a situation where she had to decide whether or not to execute this guy. The scene could have been written so that he is shot as she clears out the room. He could have pulled a gun on her and she could have killed him in self-defense, but no. Zack specifically contrived the scene so that Kora would execute an unarmed prisoner, and I have absolutely no fucking clue why he would want his protagonist to do such a thing. Kora then repositions the main gun and fires upon the bridge. I am something of a layman when it comes to the designs of military space vessels, but this seems like a pretty catastrophic design flaw. It should not be possible to do this for precisely this reason. The mechanism should not allow for— you know what, there are so many fucking problems with this movie that I'm just going to let Zack have this. It's okay, Zack, it's okay. The Imperium designed their fleet of ships in such a way that they can be destroyed if the guy in charge of the big gun is having a bad day. And given the general behavior of the various admirals and generals in these films, bad days do not seem to be in particularly short supply. Upon realizing that Kora is about to use the ship's own big guns against it, Noble heads to the elevator and shoots Cassius in the face for no reason. Why? Oh, right. Yeah, he's evil, obviously. I will remind you that Imperium protocol is to return to the Motherworld immediately in the event of an admiral's death. After Admiral Noble was potentially killed, Cassius did not return to the Motherworld. He broke protocol. He warp-traveled to Gondival so as to try and recover Noble. Cassius saved Noble's life, and in return, Noble just shot him in the face. Again, for no reason. Because he's really, really, really evil, and you can tell because he just shot Cassius in the face. This is what evil people do, after all. They are evil, and they do evil because they are evil. Anyway, we're pretty much at the end now. Noble's head gets sliced in half, the Blood Axes are still late to the battle, and they still change their minds off-screen for absolutely no reason. Stained glass boob window. So after all that, what did we actually get? We got some blood, a whole bunch of squashed heads, some naughty words, an intro scene and character work for Private Aris, tentacle porn, 2 new scenes of character development through dialogue, bringing the number of scenes involving character development through dialogue to a grand total of 2, a metric fuck-ton of grain, 2 overly long and indulgent sex scenes, and further damage to one of the least coherent and least comprehensible characters that I have ever seen. There are a whole bunch of small tweaks to the dialogue in various scenes where a character will say what they say in the original cut, but they will then throw in a couple of additional sentences which don't alter the meaning of the scene, nor do they alter how these characters are characterized. So in those cases, I just didn't bother mentioning them. There is no need to. This is filler in the truest sense of the word. The scenes are the same as they were before, just longer and with more speaking. Particularly in the case of Part 2, there are very few changes to the film itself. The main extension is to the exposition flashback involving the assassination of the royal family. Other than that, the vast majority of the changes are just the addition of blood and exploding bodies and shit. The film is pretty much the same, and the film was unfettered garbage the first time around, and so this time it is unfettered garbage, but we get to repeatedly see what happens when someone's head is hit with futuristic weaponry in excruciating detail. So let's very briefly look at what the director's cut actually accomplishes for each of the main characters. Guna gets to sex Kora and make out with her one extra time, which pays lip service and, I guess, penis service to the idea that they are actually in love. He also prevents Titus and Kai from fighting, and other than that, the character is unchanged. Nemesis is damaged because she is confirmed to be suicidally devoted to vengeance, only to realize 5 minutes later that vengeance is bad. Tarak is damaged because he is an idiot who thinks all large muscular men are generals. However, the depiction of his guilt over his past is a marginal improvement, but this doesn't really affect the character, just how the information is communicated to the audience. He also spends his time dancing with old ladies and later playing Hide the Hippogriff. He is also shown to be directly willing to risk his life to rescue the Hamburglar against Titus's wishes, so overall a very marginal improvement. Aris receives a significant glow-up, although the character is by no means good. His relationship with Sam actually exists now, and his backstory does explain his actions. He is still extremely forgettable, but he has by far the biggest improvement from the director's cut. Kora is damaged because the reason why she murders the princess goes from hilariously bad to extremely hilariously bad. She does attempt to convince the villagers to leave, which is good. She believes Titus to be a defender of the innocent, which is bad. And the film doubles down on the idea that Kora is a remorseless killer who will happily murder unarmed prisoners and commit war crimes. Titus, the Hamburglar, and Noble are unchanged, just more of the same. In conclusion, this is mature content in the most immature way imaginable. This is what a 13-year-old thinks constitutes an adult movie. The additional 2 hours of content do contain some tiny improvements and clarifications that answer apparent plot holes from the original cuts. However, fixing something that was broken does not mean that the director's cut is good, and it does not mean that it is better, given that the vast majority of the extra footage is filler in the purest form. Additionally, don't get me wrong, 95% of my criticisms of the original cuts still stand after watching the director's cuts. The director's cuts are not quite as mind-numbingly boring as the original cuts, because despite being longer, there is more action, the action is more absurd and more violent, and lest we forget, we have incredible comedic moments, including the exploding frog boy and the sad spider baby. If you enjoyed the original cuts, you will probably enjoy these for no reason other than that it's more. But for those of us with standards, do not waste your time. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed listening to me talk about Rebel Moon for what is hopefully the last time. If you did like the video, please consider subscribing and drop me a like, and I will see you in my next video.